Rancher found a mail-order bride with a bruised face and a note. He said, "You're not alone now." The sky over Willow Creek carried a dreary weight that morning, the kind that seemed to hang low enough to brush a man's shoulders. Jacob Hartley stood beside the dusty stagecoach platform, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn coat, boots buried halfway in the mud that last night's storm had left behind. The cold cut deep, but Jacob had long grown used to the sting of weather. What he wasn't used to, what tightened his chest more than any winter wind, was waiting for a woman he knew nothing about. A mail-order bride. The words still felt strange whenever he said them, even inside his own head. He hadn't planned on marrying this way. He still remembered the way his mother taught him about love, slow, patient, something that grew from small moments. But after years working the unforgiving land, losing his family one by one, and watching the ranch become an echo of what it once was, loneliness had wrapped itself around him like an old blanket. Too familiar. Too heavy. So when he received the letter from a matchmaker in Missouri, offering the chance of companionship, of rebuilding a life, he convinced himself this was right. That maybe this stranger, Miss Evelyn Shore, could be someone he could talk to, build with, maybe laugh with. He didn't expect perfection. He didn't want it. He wanted a partner, a presence, someone who understood what it meant to be alone and still choose hope. But what he received instead shattered every expectation. The stagecoach rumbled to a stop, wheels scraping against rocks. The door swung open, and the driver hopped out first, stretching his back and muttering something about bad roads. Jacob didn't hear a word, because at that moment, a slender hand emerged from the dark interior, followed by a woman who looked like she might collapse under the weight of the morning itself. Her boots touched the ground unsteadily. She clutched a small carpetbag, worn thin at the corners. Her hair, once neatly pinned judging from the remnants, fell messily around her face. But it was her face that stopped Jacob's breath. A deep bruise mottled her cheekbone, blooming purple and yellow like a cruel fingerprint. A split on her lip had only half healed. The swelling beneath her right eye had begun to fade but was still unmistakably the mark of violence. Jacob's hand instinctively tightened around the brim of his hat. This wasn't the picture of the shy, soft-spoken woman he'd expected. This wasn't a woman escaping hardship for marriage and opportunity. This was someone running for her life. She lifted her gaze tentatively, flinching at the sound of a wagon rolling nearby. When her eyes met Jacob's, fear flickered in them, raw, trembling, the kind that came from wounds deeper than the skin. Before he could take a step toward her, she extended a shaking hand, holding out a small folded piece of paper. I was told to give you this," she whispered, her voice hollow as if scraped thin from crying or silence. "Please, read it." Jacob accepted the note gently, as though afraid the act alone might frighten her. The paper was crumpled, damp around the edges, as if clutched tightly for many hours. He unfolded it slowly. 4 uneven words stared back at him. "Please protect her. She's in danger." The handwriting was rushed, desperate, slanted as if scribbled in panic. Jacob felt the breath leave his body. He lifted his eyes to her again. She stood still, gripping her carpetbag so tightly her knuckles paled, her face half hidden behind strands of hair. She looked like a deer cornered between hunters. Jacob swallowed hard. "Miss Evelyn Shore." She nodded, barely. He folded the note carefully, slid it into his coat pocket, and stepped closer, not fast, not loud, just enough so she could hear him clearly over the wind. "Evelyn," he said softly, firmly. "You're not alone now." The words settled around them like a blanket. He didn't say them as a promise of marriage or ownership. He said them as a man watching another human fight to stay standing. The fear in her eyes flickered again, this time, with something else beneath it. Relief. Fragility. Hope trying to spark through suffocating fear. The wagon ride home. Jacob loaded her bag into the back of his wagon, then offered her a hand onto the seat. She hesitated as though expecting the gesture to turn harsh at any moment. When it didn't, when he simply lifted her up without squeezing or forcing, her breath trembled out in a shaky exhale. The horses started forward, hooves thudding against the thawing mud. The morning was quiet except for the occasional rustle of trees and the creaking of the wagon wheels. Evelyn stared straight ahead, shoulders hunched, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jacob saw the way she kept adjusting her shawl, tugging it higher, as if trying to hide her bruises from the world, or perhaps from herself. He wanted to ask what happened. Who hurt her? Why that note was written in panic. But she was a stranger, and a wounded one. Pushing her would only drive her deeper into whatever fear she carried. So he kept his tone light and warm. The ranch is about an hour from here. We'll get you settled. Got a warm fire goin' and stew on the stove. Her eyes flicked toward him briefly. You cook. Only when the rumblin' in my stomach convinces me that starvation is a poor way to go. A faint smile touched her lips, so small one might think it imagined. But Jacob saw it, and something warm stirred in his chest. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was the kind of quiet shared between two people still learning how to exist around each other. After a while, Evelyn spoke, her voice uncertain. I apologize for my appearance. Jacob blinked. You don't need to apologize for anything. My father asked me not to say much until we arrived, she murmured. Just to give you the note and trust you. Well, Jacob said gently, you can trust that you're safe for now. And no one's expectin' you to say anything before you're ready. She swallowed, looking out over the fields. Thank you. The wind carried the faint scent of pines and wet earth as they traveled toward Hartley Ranch. Jacob stole glances now and then, watching as Evelyn's rigid posture slowly eased. She took in the rolling hills, the distant barns, the tall whispering grass. Her shoulders relaxed bit by bit, as though the open land offered her a freedom she hadn't known in a long time. The Hartley Ranch. The ranch came into view like a watercolor painting, sun catching on the roof of the old farmhouse, smoke curling from the chimney, the barn standing tall against the horizon. Evelyn stared at it with wide, cautious eyes. It's beautiful, she whispered. Jacob's voice softened. It's home. Least, that's what I'm hoppin'. Somebody might call it again one day. She didn't answer, but her gaze lingered on the house with a quiet longing. Jacob helped her down from the wagon, letting her step onto the ground before stepping back respectfully. Her carpetbag dangled in her hand, too light, far too light for a woman traveling to a new life. As if she left everything behind in a hurry. Or was forced to leave. Jacob held the door open. Go on in. Fire's warm. Inside, the house greeted them with heat, the scent of burning cedar, and the lived-in feel of a place cared for but lonely. Evelyn stepped toward the hearth as though drawn by the warmth, holding out her hands instinctively. Jacob watched her, quietly. The bright firelight illuminated the extent of her injuries, the bruising across her cheek, the faint marks along her jawline, the way she winced when she lifted her arms as if expecting pain. He brought out a basin of warm water, a clean cloth, and a blanket. We'll take things at your pace, he said. There's no rush for explanations. No expectations either. Evelyn's eyes shimmered. No man had ever spoken to her like that. Jacob could see it in her expression. After a moment, she whispered, I'll repay your kindness. I promise. You don't owe me a thing. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She simply sat down slowly, the fire dancing across her face as tears formed unbidden and slipped silently down her cheeks. Jacob turned away, giving her privacy to cry. The first days. Evelyn slept long and deep that first night, exhaustion pulling her under until late morning. Jacob tended to chores quietly so the sounds wouldn't wake her. When she finally emerged, she looked rested but fragile, like someone who had escaped a storm but still had thunder inside her. He offered her a warm breakfast. She whispered her thanks. When she accidentally dropped a spoon and it clattered loudly, she flinched so violently the look of apology on her face nearly broke him. It's all right, he said quickly. Just a spoon, that's all. Her breathing steadied slowly. Over the next days, Jacob noticed things, small things, but sharp enough to paint a bleak picture. Evelyn startled at sudden sounds. She avoided walking near windows after dusk. If someone passed by the property road, she froze until they were gone. She apologized too often. She ate too quietly, as though trying not to disturb anyone. And sometimes, when she thought Jacob wasn't looking, she touched her bruised cheek as if remembering the moment it was inflicted. Jacob kept his distance just enough for comfort but stayed close enough for support. He spoke gently, let her choose the pace of every conversation, showed her how to gather eggs, how to feed the horses, how to sweep dust from the porch. Slowly, Evelyn began to open. One evening, as the sun painted the porch gold, she spoke more than she had since arriving. My father wasn't a bad man, she said softly. Just a desperate one. After my mother died, he borrowed money from the wrong man. Too much. Too quickly. And when he couldn't repay it, that man demanded, me. She looked down at her hands. As payment. Jacob felt a slow burn rise in his chest. Who was he? A man named Barrett Cole. Jacob stiffened. Everyone in the region knew that name. Cole was a businessman on paper, a tyrant underneath, wealthy, ruthless, known for threatening those who stood in his way. Evelyn continued, her voice trembling. My father tried to refuse. But Cole gave him a week to reconsider. The night before I was meant to be taken, my father woke me, handed me the note, and told me to run. He said he'd stall Cole as long as he could. Jacob swallowed. And did he? I don't know, she whispered. I left before dawn. I never saw him again. A tear slid down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, almost fearfully, as if ashamed of being seen crying. Jacob didn't interrupt. He didn't touch her. He simply stood there, present and steady. After a long silence, Evelyn looked at him with pleading eyes. If you want to send me back, I won't blame you. I never meant to bring danger to your doorstep. Jacob met her gaze with a calm firmness. Evelyn, I'm not sending you anywhere. His voice dropped lower, an oath carved from his soul. No man has a right to own you. And no man is taken you from here. Her breath hitched, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked less like a frightened stranger, and more like someone trying to believe she deserved safety. A fragile peace. As days turned into a week, Evelyn began to blossom in small, tentative ways. She learned to cook beside Jacob, sometimes laughing softly when flour dusted her sleeves. She started brushing the horses gently, and they seemed to sense her gentleness, nuzzling into her hands. She helped Jacob mend fences, though her hands were unused to rope and wood. At night she sat by the fire, reading from Jacob's small collection of books, romances and adventures his mother had once loved. Jacob found himself lingering near the doorway, watching her read. The fire danced in her eyes, painting her face with warmth instead of fear. She seemed lighter then, as if laying down pieces of her past, one by one. But fear wasn't a creature that vanished quickly. Some nights, Jacob heard her wake with a gasp, the echoes of nightmares tightening her breath. He never intruded, he only lit the lantern in his own room so she'd have the comfort of knowing someone was awake. Once, he found her outside on the porch long before dawn, shivering beneath her shawl. He handed her a blanket without a word and sat beside her, both watching the stars. She didn't speak that night. But she didn't need to. Healing wasn't loud. It was quiet and slow, like the thawing of winter. But danger has a way of following. It was the 9th day when Jacob noticed the first sign. Tracks. Fresh ones. A heavy horse had ridden close to the property line. Too close. Evelyn saw the tension in Jacob's shoulders as he examined the ground. Her breath caught. Could be anybody, Jacob said, though his voice held a sharp layer beneath it. But stay close to the house today. When she nodded, Jacob saw the fear rushing back into her eyes, the way she wrapped her arms around herself again, as if an old wound reopened. Later that evening, a rider passed along the distant ridge as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Just a silhouette, but enough to set Evelyn trembling. Jacob placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Evelyn, look at me. She lifted her eyes slowly. You're not going anywhere. Not while I'm breathing. And in that moment, in the fading light of dusk, Jacob wasn't just a rancher. He became her shield, her anchor, the first person to stand between her and the darkness chasing her. Evelyn blinked as tears welled again, but this time they weren't from fear alone. They were from gratitude, from a fragile trust blooming like a flower stubborn enough to grow through stone.